Coming up, something of a dazed and confused episode for Cornerstone's Plugged In series with my host, Steve Williams, who might play the role of Wooderson, famously done by the one and only Matthew McConaughey. I'm Al Dominic, and I have to admit, I am just a bit dazed by the Dallas Mavericks trading Luka Doncic to the Lakers. But I am certainly not confused by the growth of a standout bank down in the Lone Star State, led by our guest, the CEO, Malcolm Holland from Veritex. So, Malcolm, what's happening, my friend?
Yep. Good morning, guys. Great to be with you. Yep. Dallas is in mourning officially now that Luka's gone.
Well, the conspiracy theorists among us will have to take a pause before we get into the future of the Mavericks and really the NBA, because there's a lot of news that's been coming out. Steve Williams loves to dig into releases and earning reports and other things that hit over the weekend. Steve, what do you find about the bank that is worth our listeners hearing?
I'm excited. We're starting the year with Plugged In with a true entrepreneur in banking. So, this is just a great story of a bank being started in 2009 in the middle of the financial crisis when people are worried about TARP money, and Malcolm and team come in and say, let's build Texas's bank. So, I think just incredible growth that we've talked about, but also a place that's really bound in mission and purpose. So I hope we dig into that. And just someone, again, who is, for relationship managers and professionals and even techies out there, someone who makes banking fun every week. Charge the hill, grow the place, have fun. So, Malcolm, thanks so much for joining us and kicking off our year in 25, which is let's keep saluting the entrepreneurial bankers out there.
Glad to be here. I am an entrepreneur. I'm just in a banker's body. So we look forward to talking.
Well, as both Steve and Malcolm mentioned, it's a really interesting time to be, in the banking hot seat that he's in. We love bringing entrepreneurs onto Plugged In, and really, again, today is no exception. What's interesting is I had an opportunity to listen to Malcolm's CFO, Terry Early, recently at Acquire Be Acquired out in Arizona. Terry dropped some pretty compelling Texas market demographics while talking about how you're building a smarter bank. So I had jotted some notes down, so forgive me, guys, if I just rattle off some stats. But Sure. The population of Texas is 30 million, and that's second largest in the U.S. behind California. Correct. You have a projected population growth of 4.1% versus the national average of 2.1%. So really, we're talking 2 times the average U.S. rate. What I think is cool from a banking standpoint is 54 Fortune 500 companies are headquartered in Texas, 49 of which are in the bank's core target markets. Again, living in DC, I'm surrounded by economists and lobbyists and folks who are trying to pull businesses over here to the East Coast. But since 23, there have been 24 headquarters relocated to the state of Texas. And since 2018, 465. So, you start to think about all this in the construct of economies. And if Texas was its own independent being, which we know some Texans love to talk about, it would be the 8th largest economy in the world with more than $2.6 trillion valued against it. So for a pro-business environment with no personal or corporate income taxes, it's a pretty decent place to call home. And so I also have to imagine it's a pretty decent place to run a bank.
There's no question. You definitely hit the highlights. I didn't pick Texas. I went to SMU back in the late 70s and ended up staying here. My family's from here. I didn't grow up here. And so it's by happenstance that we're here. And fortunately, we've had some pretty good leadership at the government level down in Austin for many, many decades. And let's not forget, we have this stuff that comes out of the ground that's black and runs
liquid gold.
And that sure does make things easier to make the budgets get met every year. Not to mention a climate and all those other things. But we're fortunate to be in the state of Texas for so many reasons.
Awesome. Everything's bigger in Texas. And I firsthand saw this when I went to St. Mark's in Dallas for a few years in high school. So I have an appreciation for where Malcolm is, what he's doing. And also, I said dazed and confused. I have some appreciation for movie and musical references. And since we love to use some lyrics on Plugged In to keep the conversation going, I thought I'd borrow from that wonderful movie. They had quite a few songs that are very near and dear to most of our hearts. So I'm going to say, with apologies to Foghat and their famous song, slow ride.
I
This
love
has
it.
not been a slow ride for your team down in Texas. So, Malcolm, maybe you can kick it off by talking about, kind of how things started. So, if you take us back to the start of the
Yeah.
bank, what did you envision and what has happened since
Right.
then?
Yeah. So listen, those are great questions. I've always had this entrepreneur bug in my body, and actually in 1985, when I was 25 years old, I started a bank from scratch with two other guys, literally a de novo. And as you recall, or some they know, 89 to 90 was the worst time in banking that we've ever
Yeah.
had, and so I've kind of experienced these bad times. And so you just fast forward, in 2009, it was getting pretty nasty. You could buy banks, FDIC assisted, and what have you, and they were folding. And I was with a bank called Colonial Bank Group out of Montgomery, Alabama, and
Yeah.
we were closed. I believe it was August 16th of 2009. And at the time, I was actually trying to buy the Texas assets that we had built up within Colonial and extract them out before
Mhm.
a potential failure. I didn't know it was going to fail, but it felt like it was going to. And so Texas was doing fine. I was unable to get that transaction done. The bank was closed, and BB&T came in that Friday and took over the bank. And so I was at BB&T for about 3 weeks, and they offered me a great job. Run Texas. We'll give you the capital. Keep going. Blah blah blah. And I went home to my wife and I said, "Honey, I can't do this." And she goes, "What do you mean?" And I said, "I BB&T is a fine institution, but they do things in banking that I don't I don't understand, and that's not how we build them in Texas."
Mhm.
And so a little bit, I'm a very transparent guy, so it's just we got wiped out financially pretty much in the Colonial Bank deal, and her mom had just passed away and left her a little bit of money. And so I went to my wife and I said, "Honey, here's what I want to do. I want to leave the bank and I want to go find a bank to buy or start a new bank. And I'm going to take all the money that your mom left you, not me, and I want to invest it in this business." And she goes, "Now let me get this straight. You're you're 49 years old. We just got wiped out. They just offered you the best financial deal you've ever had in banking from a large company that's not going anywhere. And you want to take all the money that my mom left me to start this business, and you have no idea who you're going to buy or what you're going to do." And I said, "Yeah, that's pretty much it." And she goes, "All right, I believe in you."
Man.
That's a
And that
great wife.
and that literally is how it happened. And I
That's
went
awesome.
in the next week and I said, "Guys, I'm leaving." And I took that money and I brought 3 people with me.
Oh,
And we started our trek to do Veritex. And fast forward a year later, we found a bank. We finally closed on it in September of 2010. And we bought our first bank, and we bought 3 little banks in the first 13 months. And so that was the start and evolution of Veritex. And the goal was to build a $1 to $1.5 billion bank and sell it like everybody else did. That's what you do
Mhm.
in community banking. You build it, you sell it, and you take your $10 stock and you hopefully get $20 for it, and you move on. That didn't happen that way, but that's how it got started.
That's awesome. Well, now at 12, 13 billion, where is the end of the journey for you? Because you're kind of proven that a regional bank, or at least a small regional bank, can still be fun and edgy. And what has the landscape changed that you have to exit at a few billion? And can you keep the ride up going, Malcolm?
Yeah. So I think that if you look back over our 14 and a half years, in September, it'll be a 15-year anniversary of our first bank. The one thing that we've done really well, we've done a couple of things, but one thing we've done really well is we've been opportunistic along the entire journey. And so we just want to be ready for potential opportunities that come our way. And the only way you can be ready is have the right team and the right people and have capital. You have to have those two ingredients in order to be successful. And so that's one of the reasons we went public in 2014 was the capital thing. I got tired. I raised 65, $70 million on my own until that time. And it was a rear end whipping. I mean, it was hard.
Yeah.
But the landscape has changed. Once you kind of pass certain hurdles, things look different. And so, the one thing, listen, I don't like to look back very often and say, I wish I would have done that. I wish I would have done this, because they all have, you learn from all these different things. But the one thing is, when we decided to go over $10 billion on our own, that was hard. And it's expensive. And I missed the cost. Terry and I both missed the cost. So we find ourselves in this spot, which we call no man's land. And the regulators actually mentioned that to us. And so the next plateau, if you will, is kind of 17 and a half to 22 and a half. And so that's where we find ourselves today. And I have the team to do it. We have the markets to do it. And so I think that's where we're headed. But who knows? Who knows?
Yeah, it's clear that the math really shows, and it shows with you. You go over 10 and your mid 50s efficiency ratio jumps to the low 60s, and it's just part of life. And to do that, obviously, with the Fed tightening that we experienced was no fun.
Correct.
But it sounds like you believe that this is still a great place for talent and RMs to come to and grow the bank. That, and to me, it's keeping the place that this is my best option as a great RM in Texas.
Absolutely.
Well, and as you guys are talking, what shouldn't be lost in there is something Malcolm said about his team and having the right team in place right now to compete. And so you've got some outcomes that you can drive towards, but without the people, then, you're not going to get processes or financial performance. So, if I caught you on a good day coming into the office, feeling positive about like your wife giving you that money and seeing what's happened, you could toss some Aerosmith and their Sweet Emotion in. If you remember in Days and Confused, like that slow ride coming in.
Malcolm's wife had a Sweet Emotion, I'll tell you that much.
But I'm putting it in the positive sense of, if you've got the right team, like that to me is really a standout comment. So what's been the biggest challenge about getting the culture right for your team so that as the bank continues to grow in size, in scale, and I would imagine complexity, that you're not losing what's made you that entrepreneurial, go-to?
Right.
Yeah. So this is all about people. And along the way, people, including me and everyone else on my team, have certain ceilings, if you will. And people can grow and continue to learn, but at some point in time, what I've seen in my 43 years doing this, people get to a ceiling. And so as a leader and as the CEO of a business, you have to be able to recognize when that happens. Now I'm probably slow. I can recognize it. I'm probably slower to act on it than most because I have great compassion for great people. But that just because you have that compassion for great people, you have to be able to make really hard decisions. And so along my journey, I have had to change out different people along the way. Terry Early is our 4th CFO. And so that didn't just happen. We had to make some changes. My chief credit officer, I'm on my 3rd chief credit officer. And he's phenomenal, but I've had to change out my chief banking officer 2 times in the last 3 years. And so you have to make these changes. And this has nothing to do with about the people and what kind of people they are. It has everything to do about capacity.
Yeah.
And so I can be, they can say a lot of things about me. One of the things they probably wouldn't say is that I'm not willing to make the hard people decision, which that make me sound like a real turd. But the fact is, that's what that's what you have to do in this position. And so to your point about people, you have to continue to evaluate and continue to see if they can grow with where you're headed. I have a chief risk officer. It's a great story. Was with me at Colonial. I brought her over. She was in the CRA space 20 years ago, bank examiner. And she came to me. I came to her about 4 years ago. I said, Ange, here's the deal. I'm going to have to probably hire you a boss. You don't have any experience in the chief risk officer space, because we were 7 billion and growing. And she said, okay, I understand. She says, but I got a question. Will you allow me to go educate myself, train myself, and do the work necessary to be the chief risk officer? And I said, you're willing to do that, get all the certificate? He goes, I'm willing to give it a try. And I said, absolutely.
Yeah, go.
Today, Angela's a chief risk officer of a $13 billion bank. I've asked regulators, I've asked consultants, I've asked everybody I can. Can she do it? Can she do it? An astounding 100% yes. She can take us to 20. So her ceiling was limited, but she wanted to go and reinvent herself.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I got a great success story for a 20-year employee that would literally get in front of a bus for me.
And Malcolm, what's so cool hearing that is that models the type of curiosity that Steve and I have talked to other CEOs about who have, started business, like Mike Daniels at Nicolay, talking about how he grows his team, and looking for curiosity is something that he prizes.
Yeah.
Clearly, that's something that you value as well, because somebody's not going to go out and work their tail off if they don't believe they have the support of the leader. And it's got to be genuine and authentic. It can't just be, yeah, go do it so I don't have to make the tough call of finding you a boss.
Right.
Yeah. And Al, I think you've got a song about the wins of DEI and what Veritex is up to. I think that example ties nicely with your question, doesn't it?
Totally. Well, this is Arizona's own Alice Cooper, who
right.
has schools out. So school's really not out at the bank, because you do have a women in banking initiative that I think is pretty compelling. And Steve's point is right. DEI has in the last few weeks become that woke term that some people are walking away from. But I also am finding other organizations say, hey, the more diverse we can create our team, the better business outcomes we're able to recognize. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that Women in Banking initiative and how it started. What have been some of the outcomes, and what do you think is next for it?
Yeah, and I'll actually go one step further as I talk about people around my table. So I have 7 direct reports. I have 3 women. They are not there because they're women. I can absolutely assure you. I just described to you one of them, Angela. They're there because they're the best in class, and they're the best for our company. And so when we bought the very first bank, professional bank in East Dallas, it had 3 branches. There was a gal over there whose dad was actually a longtime Dallas banker, and she was going to get out of the business. She was kind of a business development person. She says, I don't know if I can do this Veritex thing, blah, blah, blah. FYI, she's still here and leads our Women in Business initiative. So she said, I have this idea. I want to invest in small business, which is what Veritex is best at, but I want to do it for the women out there, because I don't think there's an initiative out there. And I said, Darlene, you got 100% of my support. Go do it. And so with her help, and without her, we wouldn't have gotten there. She started this little bitty thing called Women in Business, and she'd invite her friends. And I used to go. I mean, there was so much estrogen in the room. I was the only guy. But I'd go and I'd meet these ladies, and I'd see what she was doing. And today, she has chapters in Houston, Dallas, Plano, Fort Worth. She's built this huge thing, and it's a conglomeration of gals in the small business space, and they all have challenges. Now, we're not saying you got to bank with Veritex. We just put the program on. Well, guess what? We end up with a fair amount of their business, and it's been well received around the city. And it's just a group that hasn't been catered to from a business standpoint. Right. People are catering to the guys all the time, and these, white males, and this gals group is major diverse.
Right.
Ethnicity, everything. It's been, and I love it. It's one of the most favorite things that we do.
Yeah. She's helping change the default setting of commercial banking, right, Malcolm?
Totally. And they need services, and they actually, the smaller the business, more partnership there is. You continue to move up the realm of revenues. They start telling you how they're going to borrow money.
Yeah.
This is a real partnership.
What's so cool is how organic and authentic it was. You know, it wasn't a
Very.
corporate PR initiative. It was
It
a
was.
movement started by someone with some raw energy and some vision.
Well, and I think that's
Absolutely.
the cool thing about the bank. From the outside looking in, to see what's been built, to see the types of people you're attracting, to see the customers that you're able to support. Or maybe one of them's calling Steve right now. Um, but it's awesome to see all the positive. I think the three of us could probably be defined as optimists, but I'd say that
Yeah.
we also have to be pragmatists for the industry. So let me flip over. I'd pull some Bob Dylan and his Hurricane song out, because there's a lot of challenges that are facing an industry that is getting more and more optimistic about its prospects. As I mentioned, we were at Acquire Be Acquired. Steve, I think you agree. There's a prevailing thought that things are looking pretty good and they're going to look better.
Yeah.
But there's still challenges and there's still risks, and so I'm just curious at the C level. I think about fraud and how it's continuing to become more sophisticated and difficult to address. Like, how are you and your team thinking about some of those fraud risks that are impacting banks of your size, given all the different relationships that you have to have?
Yeah. So as you get bigger and bigger, obviously become more and more of a target in the technology space, cyber, that does keep most of us CEOs up. But we say that because it's a cool thing to say, right? We know there's risk out there, but is it really going to happen to you? Is really somebody really going to tap in to your system? Is someone going to really hurt you? Um, and so as a smaller bank, you don't think about that as much. Now that we're getting, we're the 93rd or 5th largest bank in the United States, we're a target. So I had the FBI guys come in town to talk to us about cyber. And I'll never forget what he said. He said, buddy, it's not that they're going to get into your system. They're there right now. It's whether they're going to be able to break down that wall or not.
Mhm.
And so as we went past this 10 billion, we got, we got a CISO, a chief information security officer. Well, I had no idea what they're looking at. And just all of the things that we're doing and investing in the redundant systems that we have, it's a real deal, and we have to stay one step ahead of our folks. And one of the people I put on my board about, I guess Greg's been on 5 years, is a technology guy out of Atlanta. And they go, why are you bringing a guy on your board from Atlanta? I go, because he's a technology specialist.
Right.
Um, well, he can't help grow the bank. I go, I'm not worried about him growing the bank. I'm worried about him helping us think through how we protect our bank.
Yep.
Right.
So it's a real deal. Fraud is a piece of all of our business. We've been very fortunate to not have many occurrences. Everyone gets hit to some degree, but ours has nothing been substantial. But it is something that is definitely top of mind and top of mind for my directors.
One thing, Al, I remember from our strategic planning season in 24 was especially veterans who were board members in our banks were bringing this up about cyber and really was saying, guys, we're in an information war. You got to think of this as a veteran thinks about like warfare, and even in a bank in Texas, the 13 billion, this can go all the way up to Russia,
Yep.
to Iran, to North Korea. And to have that awakening is, I think, really important. And veterans seem to get it faster at the board level, and they're kind of warning their colleagues at the board.
That's funny. The tech guy I brought on, he's an Army veteran.
Yeah.
Well, great observation, Steve. And also, Malcolm, as you're talking, it strikes me that the challenge of running and protecting your bank, it has to be balanced with how do you grow and change it. And that's the constant dilemma, for folks in your seat, which is you've got a team that is not just incentivized, but they're proud to say, we built something, we're not going to lose it. We're going to continue to run and protect what is known to the community. But then kind of in the back of your head, you're thinking, yeah, but I also have to figure out how to change certain things and how to grow. And that can create some tension, if not done correctly. So, to kind of take us home, one of the things that Terry presented on was, how do you earn the right to win? And how are you creating speed and ease across your client's journey with you all? So kind of walk us through your logic about diversifying the business, preparing for your next wave of opportunity without losing sight of the fact that you are one of the top 100 banks by size in this country.
Yeah, I mean, we've spent a lot of time recently on figuring out what it means when you say what we have the right to win. We have to earn the right to win. We can't just walk into offices and expect people to lay down their financial statements and go, "I can't wait to be a client of Veritex." Well, that doesn't happen. That was banking in the 70s and 80s, where you stood behind your desk and people walked in and said, this is how you can help me. Today, we have to be a lot more proactive. As you know, we have to all be in this. We're all in the sales business, but the right to win business is that you have to be informed. You have to be a specialist at some level, and you have to have products that they want, not that products that make sense for you, but make sense for them.
Yep.
And you have got to be nimble.
Mhm.
And this is where you talked about it, Al, just a second ago. This push pull between risk and sales. We call Angela in a fun way, chief sales prevention officer. Where I have my banking, the chief banking officer and her are always kind of pushing and pulling, because
Right.
we're in this business to return to our shareholders. At the same time, we have to be safe. And so we have to provide products, and we have to provide a speed to decision that beats everyone else. Listen, I can't beat Bank of America, Chase, Wells Fargo, Comerica as it relates to some of all their product set, but I can kick their rear end in responding quickly and being nimble and getting creative on solutions. And so that's what we have to do. We have to set ourselves apart. And that's what we aim to do. And in that, and what we've learned, and Steve knows this better, is our processes have to be streamlined.
Right.
And that there's so many ways that we can do a better job from start to delivery. The stuff in the middle can get all whacked out and get slow and costly. Well, we got to remove all that junk. It's got to be quick and it's got to be efficient.
Yeah, I appreciate also, Malcolm, you mixing the gene pool, bringing out of industry people like Matthew Smith, who kind of came in and took a fresh look at the value proposition, and then how do we have the rigor about growth. I think that your point about let's throw out the old banking playbook, still do great banking, but bring in new ideas. How do other businesses and industries grow with that intentionality? And with that, we've got a clear way to differentiate.
Right.
Yeah, and Steve, don't ignore the fact that you can, as an institution like this, use data to your advantage. So it also strikes me you guys really are data driven, where you're not just forecasting and letting it sit. You might do 20 forecasts in a year because conditions change, and you've got data that gives you, again, a little head start on your competition. And if you're able to execute, well, then good things typically follow.
I think for those studying, like, how is Veritex grown to its size and its brand? I think that it is a commercial bank, but there is a real data powerhouse and a bunch of data geeks who love to run the business with data behind the Veritex brand. So that as you're studying, like, well, what's their secret sauce? Data is one of them, I think.
Data is. Yeah, no, we brought in a data analytics team, and they have absolutely transformed the way we think. It used to be, well, intuitively, I think this. I think this, and now it's, hey, this is what the data says. So we have some real backup. And just, shout out to Terry and his team that, we don't want to make decisions the way we feel, because those can be dangerous. We'd like to make decisions with data, but do not lose the relational component of our business, because at the end of the day, data is great, but if you can't communicate it and you can't use it to build a relationship, in the end, it's only as good as the data. And that means the data could walk across the street.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm not sending any dartboards to Malcolm because he doesn't need to take that type of risk. I am going to thank him for this so I can go back to going down my conspiracy theorist rabbit hole around why Luka was traded from the Mavericks. But before we do, I just, on behalf of Steve Williams and the whole Cornerstone team, just want to say thanks to Malcolm Holland for giving us a little bit of his time and getting plugged in with Cornerstone Advisors.
Yeah, thanks, Malcolm. Great discussion.
Thank you, guys. Good to be with you.